This is To Your Success Radio, sponsored by Design Exchange, with stores in Pewaukee on Prospect and Main and in Heartland in the Hartbrook Mall, and Rosie's Cleaning, serving southeast Wisconsin for your residential and commercial cleaning needs. And now your host, Bob Chapman.
Welcome, everybody, to this week's edition of To Your Success Radio. This is Bob Chapman, your host, and I hope that you've taken something from all of our last shows or any of our last shows and put them into your life, because you only get one go-round, so I want you to get off the couch and get in a game of life every week. And we don't define success here. You do. So it might be losing weight. It might be being a better partner, or it might be overcoming or combating a medical condition. And we have a really special guest here in the studio today. We have Dr. Bhupendra Khatri. So welcome, Doctor.
Thank you very much, Bob.
Doc, why don't you tell us a little bit about you, and then we'll get into why you're actually here, because it's a fascinating story.
Sure. So I'm the founding medical director at the Center for Neurological Disorders and the Regional MS Center. The MS Center is one of the largest in the country. We care for over 4,500 MS patients. I have been a practicing neurologist since 1983.
Wow. Okay.
And I'm of Indian heritage, born and raised in Kenya.
Okay. Now, Dr. Khatri wrote a book here. It's called Healing the Soul, Unexpected Stories of Courage, Hope, and the Power of Mind. What got you down that road, Doctor? Because a lot of doctors that I know wouldn't necessarily think of, unexpected stories of courage, hope, and the power of the mind. So what brought that up for you?
So as healthcare providers, we learn from each other. And by seeing hundreds of patients, we learn from the patients. And I felt that it was important to share my learning, my experience with my colleagues, and with the patients as well. So that prompted me to write this book. Initially, what got me interested was my dealing with a very special patient of mine, Arita. And Arita was a young lady with very bad multiple sclerosis. And she got an attack that left her paralyzed from the neck down, and she was on a respirator. And we treated her in the ICU, and about 40 days in the ICU stay, I approached Arita and I said, Arita, if your heart should stop, what do you want us to do? Do you want the nature to take its course? Because we had tried everything and she was not getting any better. It was irreversible. And she picked up the alphabets from the board because she couldn't talk. And she said she wanted a heart and a lung transplant.
So you asked her what you wanted us to do if you stop breathing, and she wanted a heart and lung transplant.
So it was very clear that she was not ready to die. And so we continued to take care of her, and every time I walked into the room, her eyes would be focused on me. And so one day as I was going home, I could see her eyes in front of me and her staring at me. So for some reason, I just got off the expressway, went back to the hospital, went to Arita's room, and I took her hand in my hands, and I said, Arita, are you afraid to die? And she said yes, and she started to cry. And I said, is it okay if I get Father or the priest to come and talk to you? And she said yes. And so I talked to Father Joe. He was still in the hospital. And Father Joe listened to my story, and he said, Doctor, go home. I'll talk to Arita. So that was about 6:30 in the evening. And I went home. At about 8 o'clock, Father Joe called me at home, and he said he had a long talk with Arita, and she's at peace. And I said, okay. And at about 10 o'clock, the ICU nurse called me. She woke me up and says, I just want to let you know that Arita passed away in her sleep. And I could not sleep that night. I was thinking about what happened. As a physician, I was trying to heal her body, but I failed to heal her soul. And that's what the father did, the priest. And that taught me a lot. As a physician, we need to touch the soul. We need to heal the soul. And that really is where the title comes from, healing the soul. And that got me started. And over the years, I have had the privilege to take care of so many patients. And each one of them have taught me a special lesson. They've taught me a lot of things, and I wanted to pass that on.
Okay, so Arita was a real motivator.
She was. She was.
As I looked through the book this afternoon and read just a couple of snippets from it, there were so many inspirational stories. I mean, the story about Chris and the story about Bob, who you've talked about, I mean, are fascinating, inspiring, and uplifting, to say the very, very least.
Yes. That is true. As a physician, when we write a prescription and we hand over the prescription to the patient, it's just not the prescription we give. We give a lot of things along with that. We give them hope. We give them confidence. We give a lot. It's just not the prescription. And it's how you give the prescription, and that makes a big difference. To give you an example, how the mind or the positive energy can play a role in the healing. Chris was a young patient that I took care of, a very vibrant, very ambitious young lady who unfortunately developed multiple sclerosis. And she had a very difficult course. Her MS was quite severe, and she required a lot of corticosteroid therapy. She was on one of the preventive therapies that was approved at that time, but yet she was getting worse. And that was about the time when we were invited to participate in a double-blind randomized control trial of medicine that is given intravenous once a month. And we asked her to participate in the trial, and she agreed. So a double-blind study is where the patients may get placebo or can get the real drug, but they're not aware, and I'm not aware either. So we started infusing her once a month. It's a 2-year trial. 1 year into the trial, she was so much better that she could trek down the Grand Canyon with a 45-pound backpack, and she could climb up again. She started running, she started bicycling, and she was doing great. And then the unthinkable happened. The drug was pulled off the market because of some complications related to the drug. And Chris was devastated. She did not know what to do. She wanted the drug, but the pharmaceutical company would not give it to her. She went to the newspaper and talked to the editor. And in the morning, when I looked at the newspaper, there was this big photo of Chris with the title that the drug that gave her life is now pulled away from her. And that afternoon, we broke the code, and Chris was on placebo all the time. She was not getting the real drug.
So it was her mind that was helping her heal because she believed she was.
Absolutely, absolutely. Because when I called Chris and I said, Chris, I want you to know that you were getting the placebo all the time. And there was a silence, and then she said, Dr. Khatri, that is the power of positive thinking. Because never, ever did she doubt that she was not getting the real drug. She was convinced she was getting the real drug every time, every month when she came in. So that led me to question about how the mind works and how the positive energy can heal.
Right.
And that was about the time when I was trying to ask all these questions when I was asked to see an elderly man, 76 years old, who had a severe form of myasthenia gravis, which is a disease that affects the muscles. He was weak from it. He could not lift up his eyelids. The eyelids were droopy. He had difficulty speaking, with swallowing, breathing. Unfortunately, he also had a tumor of the thymus gland, which is sometimes associated with this condition. When the surgeon operated, the thymoma was stage 4, which is the cancer of the thymus gland. The surgeon took out whatever he could, and The oncologist said that he's a frail man, so chemotherapy is going to be very, very difficult. But the family wanted to pursue, and so he did receive the chemotherapy. And the side effects and the complications of chemotherapy were just horrendous. He was the sickest person that you'll ever see in an ICU. His white cell counts dropped to 0. He became septic, infected. He started bleeding in the gut. But my physician assistant, John Kramer, and I will go to him twice a day and tell him, Bob, you're getting better. Your white cell count's looking better. Your chest X-ray is looking good. You're doing well. You're going to walk out of this ICU. And one day, he's of Greek ancestry, and I said, Bob, you're going to get better. We're going to have a party. We're going to have ouzo together. And so he eventually, it took about more than 2.5 months, but he walked out of the ICU. And when I interviewed him, he came to the clinic, and for his follow-up visit, I wanted to get him a bottle of ouzo, but he forgot. I forgot to bring the bottle. I checked him out. He was doing great. And I said, Bob, you're doing well. I'll see you in 3 months. And I got up, and he held my hand, and he said, sit down, Dr. Khatri. And he pulled out a bottle of ouzo from his bag. So we had. But I asked Bob, I said, Bob, did you believe us when we said that you're going to get better? We kept telling you that. And Bob looked at me straight in my eyes, and he said, no, you were bullshitting me. And I said, so what happened? And he said, but one day God came to me, and he whispered in my ears, and he said, Bob, you better listen to Dr. Khatri, because I'm going to put strength in him. He's going to be your second God.
We've gone through almost the first half of the show. We have less than a minute left to our commercial break, and Dr. Khatri and I have not even got to the questions, just talking about case studies. And I'm sure you can tell how much it's touched his heart and how much he's invested into this. Just trying to see here. I don't even know if I have a short question to ask you, Doc. I think what we'll do is there are no short answers when I'm looking at the questions I have scribbled down for you. So what we're going to do is we're going to tell you how to get a hold of the book. It's called Healing the Soul, Unexpected Stories of Courage, Hope, and the Power of Mind. And it's published by Henschel House Books, and you can get it at Henschel House, HENSCHEL House, HAUS Books.com. And we'll be back with Dr. Khatri right after the break, and I'll promise I'll try and get to some of the questions he's prepared for us.
Unique antiques, design exchange, the perfect piece to complement your decor, the perfect place to consign your classics and more. Unique antiques, design exchange.
Upscale, sophisticated, and unique are 3 words that describe Design Exchange. With 2 great locations, you are sure to find what you're looking for to add style and design to your home. Design Exchange, home decor consignment on the corner of Prospect and Main in Pewaukee, and in the Hartbrook Mall in Heartland, or on the web at designexchange.biz.
Unique antiques, Design Exchange.
Life is too short to clean your own place. You work all day running your company and then you have to turn around and clean it too? No, there's a better way. And yes, you can afford it. Rosie's Cleaning. They've been doing homes and businesses for over 10 years. Yeah, they're no fly-by-night. They're licensed and bonded, and they're affordable. Rosie's Cleaning cleans everything. Do you need them full-time or just one time? Do you need your home or business cleaned daily or one big special event or after the event cleaning? Rosie's has a price for you. Rosie's does bathrooms, blinds, dusting, floors. You know what? Let's just make this simple. Rosie's does everything you need cleaned, and yes, you can afford them. Check Rosie's on the web, rosiescleaningwiz.com, or just pick up the phone, 414-581-5735. That's 414-581-5735. You work hard all day. Life is too short to have to clean your own place, too. Let Rosie's Cleaning do it for you.
Welcome back to the second half of 2 Year Success Radio. This is Bob Chapman in the studio here with Dr. Khatri. So, Doctor, thanks for hanging on.
Thank you.
Before the break, we were talking. I don't think we quite wrapped up the story of Bob, a
Right.
patient of yours that was mid-70s. Why don't you wrap up that story for us?
So when we asked him if he believed us, and he said no, but then God came to him, he said, and he whispered in his ears, he said, Bob, you're going to get better. I'm going to put strength in Dr. Khatri, and he's your second God. You better believe him. And that's when he really turned around, because he believed truly that he's going to get better, because God told him so. But if he had not been telling him that he was going to get better, I don't think that God would have paid him a visit.
Okay.
But I think the frame of mind is very important. Just by simply saying that I want to get better, it's not going to happen. It has to come from within. You
Right.
need to really believe in yourself. And that's how the positive energy works. If you focus on something that you really, really want, you want to achieve something, you have to believe in it.
Okay. And now, when I was getting ready to interview Dr. Khatri, there were a couple of things that struck me. First off, that MS was a huge crippling disease for younger people. I mean, I think it was 20 to 40,
Yes.
or something along those lines. So the what you treated Bob for was outside of that, the MS part of it, but
Right.
it still had to do with a neurological disorder, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And one of the other things that really stuck out to me with all your stories, and the book is chock full of them. If you need an inspirational book, I highly recommend it. Is that the resiliency of the human spirit? You want to talk a little bit about that, Doctor?
Oh, absolutely. I've learned so much from my patients over the years. Very briefly, I took care of a patient when I was in training, actually, when I was an intern. That was my first MS patient. We diagnosed her. She was a Harley fan. She loved Harley. That was the only woman who I knew at the time on a Harley-Davidson motorbike. But over the years, she just progressively got worse to the point where she was very severely disabled. She was bedridden. She became eventually quadriplegic. She had to be put on a respirator and had a colostomy to collect the bowels. She had a feeding tube for all the nourishments. She was quite severely disabled. And one time, every time she would come to the clinic, I would make it a point to go and see her very quickly, not to let her wait. Mm-hmm. And one time, it took me some time. I went into the room, and I was really shocked what I saw. She had her aide cutting pictures from the Home Improvement magazine and putting it in an album. And I said, Laura, what are you doing this for? Because I knew, it was a permanent disability, and she was completely quadriplegic. And Laura looked at me and smiled, and he said, Doctor, if you cannot live in that house, at least live in your dreams. Don't ever give up. And, that was a powerful message to me.
Those are words everybody should live by.
Absolutely.
Not just somebody who has a disability.
Absolutely. And then, so eventually what happened was she got admitted with pneumonia to the ICU. And I was examining her, and the television, they were getting ready. The newscast came and said, Milwaukee's getting ready for the 90th Harley-Davidson parade.
Right.
And there were going to be about 125,000 bikers. And we both looked at each other, and I knew how much she loved Harley and how much she wanted to be in there. That was the first time I could not look into her eyes, and I looked away because I had tears in my eyes at that time. But that evening I said, physically she may be disabled, but her soul is alive. And so I contacted Harley-Davidson people. I called the ambulance people. We fitted a respirator in the ambulance, and she rode in the parade with all the doors open, with 125,000 bikers. And she told me, she says, every nerve of my body came alive with that thunder from the motorbikes.
Wow.
So, they teach you so much. Disability is physical, but the soul is alive.
Right. If we can just backtrack just a minute. When you said you met this lady when you were in your internship.
Yes.
What was it back then that made you decide this was going to be my course for life, my specialty?
So Laura was the first patient that I diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, and I spent a lot of time with her. And when I told her about the diagnosis, she cried. We sat there for a while in her room, and then she looked at me and she says, "Doctor, you're going to be my neurologist. Will you be my neurologist?" And I nodded my head, and I said, "Yes, I will be your neurologist." And little did I know that she was going to teach me so many things over the years to come. And as I started taking care of her, the other patients in the community said, here's a doctor who is really interested in caring for MS, and they all started to come to me, and gradually we built up the MS program.
Okay. Let me digress just a little bit, because I want to ask you the question here. The role of the caregiver in the well-being of a severely compromised patient. In your expertise and years of doing this, what have you found that role should be, doctor?
It's a very difficult role. The caregivers, they care for the patients, they're with them all the time, and only they know what it takes to be a caregiver. I have only observed them, and I know what it takes to be a caregiver. But the important thing is that the patients want to be loved, and they feel that if there's if the caring that is offered with love, then they feel very good about it. They heal. But if the caring is done without any love to it, they can sense it, and that creates a problem. But to give you an example, I interviewed about 30 quadriplegic patients in one of my stories called The Paralyzed. And all of these patients were paralyzed from the neck down, and they need 24/7 care. They need to be turned, they need to be fed, they need to be bathed, they need to be catheterized to get the urine out several times a day. If they're incontinent bowels, they need to clean them. And when I interviewed them, the patient said, it didn't really matter if there was a crease in the bed sheet that caused them a lot of discomfort, because there were a lot of other things that they needed to ask the caregivers to do for them. And there were a lot of questions that I asked, and I discussed that in my book, that the caregivers who were there, their spouses or their partners, they started to cry. They went out of the room. They couldn't stay there.
Right.
Because what had happened was they'd become just the caregivers and not their spouses or their partners. And then they realized what it was.
Well, you touched on something as we were preparing for the show, in that you said you spent an hour on the phone today with an insurance company, or
yes.
And the thing is that in that discussion, it was never a discussion about Laura or Bob or Chris. It was about a case number.
Yes.
There was no personalizing. It was just a number.
Sure. So that is so true. We make all these advances. We America is leading in finding cures, for finding newer treatments, effective therapies. But yet, when it comes to using these therapies for our patients, we are guided by the insurance companies. They restrict our use. Even though they're not present in the exam room, their presence is there. It's an unseen presence, but it's felt.
Right.
And they dictate what you can and what you cannot do. And we spend a lot of time with the insurance companies trying to get the authorization. And there's a couple of chapters in the book that I've discussed that very in great detail. The amount of time and the frustration that comes with it.
Okay. Dr. Khatri came eminently prepared, like almost all of our guests do, and put hours in. This is what he lives and breathes. We've got like 2 minutes left. Can you just tell me, Doc, to what degree should doctors become personally involved with their patients?
I think we have to get personally involved in the sense that, when we're caring for a patient, and we hand out the prescription, we're handing out a lot. We're handing out a lot of, along with the prescription. By simply putting a hand on their shoulders, it means a lot, as opposed to just computer-generated prescription that they get at the pharmacy. So I think we need to know what's ailing the patient, and the stress can play a big role. The family situation can play a big role. So as a physician, we need to discuss all of that with the patients. We need to find out what's ailing the patient. And stress is very important. Stress is the cause of majority of the problems that we see in our patients.
And we're in the last minute, Doc. I don't even know where to go with it, but does it play a big difference between Western and Eastern medicine?
Well, I think not that much, but I think the Eastern culture, there's a lot to do about meditation. Meditation plays a big role. Okay. And I think the science is showing us that meditation can play a big role. It can affect your immune system. It can affect your neurophysiology, your blood pressure. And that's important.
Okay. Well, we've wrapped up another show, and Dr. Bhupendra Khatri is here with Healing the Soul, the Unexpected Stories of Courage, Hope, and Power of the Mind. Doctor, I want to thank you so much for coming in. Heck, I'd like to follow up with you because there's so much we left on the table that we could talk about. Again, I want to thank everybody, all of our listeners. I want to thank Design Exchange and Rosie's Cleaning. So please let them know that you heard about them on our show. I want to thank you all for listening. This is Bob Chapman here at To Your Success Radio. So, get off the couch, get in the game of life. You only get one go-round. I pray that it's a good one for you. And until next week, folks.